Welcome back to the Classic Match Review, and this is episode 3, where I'll be discussing Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker at Wrestlemania 30. Now, in this series, I cover my favourite matches, whether they be on Raw, SmackDown, or on WWE pay-per-views, of course, and what bigger platform than WrestleMania and the 30th edition as well, where we saw the end of the streak. Now, for me, this is one of my favourite matches, more so because of the historic nature, more so than the quality of the match. Sometimes it's important to understand the context of a match as well when it's not necessarily the best quality. So we all know matches such as, say, Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25 was bell to bell, an absolutely brilliant match altogether. But when you have matches that are based more so on a historical purpose and a shock factor like this was, it's also easy to forget that it can go down as, you know, a favourite for people. Sometimes people may not put that list maybe in their top 10 or top 5 and just put pure wrestling matches, which of course there is nothing wrong with. But for me, I like to have that mix, because when I go back and say watch WrestleMania 30, 100% this is one of the matches I will always watch. And as with all our reviews, I will go ahead and provide you with the background before the feud to the actual match and then the aftermath. So we'll start with the background to this. So of course, WWE have had Undertaker and Brock Lesnar feud in the past, and that was back in 2002. Who would forget the run that Lesnar had when he won the King of the Ring, beat The Rock at SummerSlam, beat Hogan on SmackDown, and then beat Taker in the Hell in a Cell at No Mercy. So he was having a great year. And at that point, I think many people would not have believed anybody if they had said within less than 2 years he'd have left the company. I don't think many people would have thought that, but it did happen, as we know now. But as I mentioned, he feuded with The Undertaker at that point, and when he did, they had a great Hell in a Cell match. Not the best, but it was definitely good in terms of what you would expect from those two. Hard hitting, and in those days we got blood, so of course that was used in the match. Now, years later, after Lesnar had left WWE, he of course had his time in the UFC, and Undertaker, who was gone, you know, out in interviews before and said that he would have loved to pursue UFC if it had come years earlier and if he was just able to. Obviously things turned out differently, but he's a huge fan. I mean, he uses those gloves, and it's you know, fairly obvious to say that he loves that UFC type of style, at least incorporating it, especially with that Hell's Gate submission he used for a while as well. But the point is, he was at a UFC show in 2010, and basically he had a face-to-face with Lesnar. Lesnar just competed, and Lesnar was out of the cage, walking back. Undertaker had asked Brock Lesnar, whether he'd want to go, or in so many words. But basically, Lesnar had walked past him, but then I think there was a couple of words acknowledged. There's a famous video of this on YouTube, and yeah, I think it was just set in place that we thought if Lesnar was going to return to WWE, then we would eventually see these two square off, and it did happen, of course. But I think Undertaker's gone on record as saying this was just something personal between the two guys. I mean, not to say that they've got animosity, but it's just that they've got that, you know, mutual respect. And I think it was just something between the two, which I think at times some people are blowing out of proportion and saying, oh, Undertaker's called out Lesnar and it's a shoot fight situation, or he's just there, you know, really hating on Lesnar almost after his loss, because I think it was a loss, if memory serves me correct. I'm not a huge UFC fan, but the point is at that point I think a lot was being made out of it. But then obviously when Lesnar returned to WWE in 2012, prior to him returning, of course, there was a few rumours going around that he would be coming back, and then I think at that point it was inevitable him and Taker would square off. And then the match itself did take place at WrestleMania 30. Now the build for this was pretty simple, to be fair. I think Lesnar was on Raw basically looking for an opponent, and there was a contract presented by Paul Heyman in the ring for it to be signed, and Undertaker came out, made his way to the ring. He returned with the look of the classic Ministry of Darkness in terms of his beard anyway. He had the goatee, but at that point his head was still shaved bald from the previous year when he had the match with Triple H, or not bald, but he had the mohawk. And yeah, I remember the specific moment he stabbed Brock Lesnar in the hand with a pen, or at least that's what they wanted us to believe. And then, of course, the choke slam through the table. But then after that, there were, the usual Undertaker segments, Brock Lesnar segments, just building up the match. Of course, Paul Heyman did a lot on the mic. And we got to WrestleMania 30, and this is where things, of course, got very interesting. So at WrestleMania 30, there was a point in the match where Brock Lesnar and Undertaker on the outside. At least this is going off what we've seen in the Last Ride documentaries recently, where there's a certain spot where I think Undertaker gets thrown by Lesnar, some sort of suplex on the outside, and the point is Undertaker gets concussed in the match very early on and he cannot remember it. So if you ask him to this day, as he's confirmed, he cannot remember what happened in that match, and it was due to this concussion. But to his credit, he carried on with the match and it still happened. And yeah, ultimately the third F5 was hit by Brock Lesnar in this match, and a lot of fans just expected, the usual routine. We'll get Undertaker kicking out any minute now, the finish will happen, tombstone, and we go home like that. But no, it wasn't the case. Undertaker was hit by the third F5 and did not kick out, and the reaction, I tell you what, whether you were there that night or watching it at home on TV, it was incredible, because I'm sure the same reaction was projected in the stadium at home for everyone. It was just shock, because you did not expect the streak to end that night. It was incredible the way the reactions were caught on camera as well, specifically people who were just there's one chap, the African American guy, who really had his eyes bulging. He's actually said over the years he wanted the streak to end, but he was more so surprised that it had ended. People always thought, oh, he's surprised because the streak's ended. He's like shocked because he didn't want it to end. But he said he wanted it to end. He just couldn't believe it actually happened. So that was a very nice touch from him to acknowledge that, because it's quite confusing for people to think, hold on, he's shocked, but not because he was surprised it ended and he didn't want it to end, but he was surprised it ended and he did want it to end. He's always been a fan of having the streak end at some point, he's basically said. But that aside, a lot of fans who were genuinely upset at the streak ending, their faces were caught here as well, and it was a incredible night. I mean, history making, the 30th edition of WrestleMania. And at that point, I know years on we know Undertaker hasn't retired, but look, he's had opportunities to hang up the boots, and we know he's still not found peace in terms of when he wants to leave and have that match that is worthy of that career. And of course, we're watching it at the moment. The Last Ride documentary series part 3 aired last week, and he's still at that moment where he's not found that match. And some may argue end of an era with Triple H at WrestleMania 28 might have been a good time. This match with Lesnar at WrestleMania 30, or even the match when he got beat by Reigns, but it didn't happen. But the point is, at this point, a lot of fans might have thought, right, that's it, Undertaker's done. It was very somber, the mood, after he got up, and Lesnar had left at that point, and he got up and walked to the back, and everybody was up clapping for him. Remember, the commentators were doing that as well. And yeah, it was really sold as it should be, as a huge moment. And that's why for me it's up there as one of my favourite matches, just because of the significance, because that is the end of the streak, the thing that we thought we'd never see end in terms of the Undertaker's WrestleMania matches. I didn't think he would ever lose the streak. I thought, yes, I've heard rumours of it being dropped to certain people in the past, but I didn't actually think it would happen. It did, and it's always interesting to go back and see it years on as well. I can't believe it's basically been 6 years since the streak ended. I mean, where does time go? Honest to God, it's absolutely amazing to think it was already 6 years ago. So we're best part of a decade removed from WrestleMania 30 and the streak ending. But yeah, after this, I don't think we saw Undertaker for a good while, because it was at this WrestleMania where he did collapse backstage and he did need to go to hospital. Of course, we come to find out that Brock Lesnar and Vince both went with him to the hospital, because obviously he was concerned. Vince was concerned about Taker, as was Brock, and they went with him midway through WrestleMania. And I don't think Vince was there when Bryan won the title. So, it was completely serious at that point. And then quite scary because Undertaker at some points was asked questions by the nurses and doctors and couldn't remember things like his name, for instance. But ultimately, he recovered. I think for the rest of 2014, there wasn't much else he did. I can't remember off the top of my head, but obviously the next year afterwards, he faced Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 31. But at this point, I definitely thought Undertaker was probably going to be calling it a day and we'd have him inducted in the Hall of Fame soon thereafter, but it didn't happen. But look, everything happens for a reason, and I guess, this match this year that we saw with AJ Styles, perhaps could that be his last match? I've already made a video on, me thinking he's going to retire on the 5th episode, and maybe that Styles match is his last, or if he has a last match, could it be at Survivor Series, the 30th anniversary this year? But then again, we've got the issue with there being no fans, no live paying audience at least, which would add to the moment. So we don't know. There's a lot more up in the air at this stage, but of course, this match itself significant for me and one of my favourites due to that reason as mentioned. So let me know what you thought of this WrestleMania 30 match. Yes, it wasn't a 5-star classic, but it definitely had 5-star significance. So let me know what you thought, and obviously let me know whether you thought the streak should have ended. If it did, obviously, was it Lesnar being the right man to do so, or who would you have had ended the streak? Everything like that, let me know in the comment section as well. In terms of episode 4 of the classic match review, I'll be discussing TLC 3. So some may say this is the Forgotten Tables, Ladders and Chairs match from 2001 on SmackDown. Of course, this was the Hardys, Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, and Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho. So this was a brilliant match, and the first, I believe, on television rather than a pay-per-view. So that'll be coming up in the next episode. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again.